Como presidente del Comité Español del Consejo Mundial de la Energía, es un placer para mí daros la bienvenida a esta nueva edición de nuestra tradicional jornada anual del Comité, titulada Energy and Climate Futures, Europe After the Energy Crisis. Es la sexta que celebramos en este auditorio, que como pueden apreciar otra vez, tenemos gente presente, lo que nos alegra muchísimo. Gracias por venir.
We have a lot of people. Thank you for coming, and thank you to all of you who are following us online. Thank you to all the sponsors, to the speakers, to the panelists. This event is hybrid and it is being transmitted via Zoom in this auditorium. It is going to last for 3.5 hours approximately, and we have divided the program into several sessions. One is welcoming, 2 plenaries, 1 roundtable, 1 plenary session, and a closing session where we're going to have the third Vice President and Minister of Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge, Teresa Rivera. Some sessions will be held in Spanish, some others in English, and for all of that, we're going to have simultaneous translation. For that, you need to connect the session. And we need to ask the questions to the hostesses who have pieces of paper and the microphones to communicate questions. The event is part of an event which is called Energy and Climate Future. From 2017, we've been talking about governance, ODS, energy transitions in different regions, recovery plans, or Spanish diplomacy in terms of energy. For this year, we started to organize in May, and we were convinced that we should be basing our year session on Ukraine and the consequences. And we thought that we had to face the energy dilemma from 3 pillars: supply, safety, affordability, and sustainability. Everybody talks about that, but the World Council in Europe has been studying from 2003, comparing the performance of more than 120 countries with the triple dilemma, analyzing the opportunities for improvement. We are involved in the Spanish Committee of the World Energy Council, and we're proud to say that we're one of the countries that have a better score. We're number 10 in the ranking. I'd like to make use of this opportunity to tell you that you need to take a look at this tool, Issues Monitor, and more recent tools that allow us to measure the advancement and get to know better the rest of regions. Be attentive also to the biggest international event of the energy industry next year, which will be held on the 26th World Global Congress of Energy in Rotterdam in December next year. It will be entitled Redesigning Energy for People and Planet. And without further ado, I'd like to now give the floor, or rather show the video with the statements of the members of the SECMES committee, the Spanish Committee of the World Energy, in order to talk about some of the issues that we're going to deal with. The way out is through, as Robert Frost said. Normally, the way out is by facing the challenges decisively, actually. In the situation that came after the invasion of Ukraine, we need to make sure of the supply, and we need to ensure the energy independence and the decarbonization problems. And with this, I believe that both things are compatible and they're aligned, actually. We need to make sure that society and the regulators and the administration in the private companies also work together in a fine-tuned way in order to make it possible. The way out is through. In an energy environment which is difficult with high energy prices and high inflation rates, it is more necessary than ever to play together with the 3 vectors of energy safety: safety of supply, sustainability, and competitiveness. The measures adopted in an emergency in the short term should not jeopardize the long-term objective of decarbonization that we have set for ourselves. There's new uncertainties that appear. There's alternatives accelerating the energy transition, maybe new technologies, new market designs that most probably will be guaranteed in this SECME yearly event. Spain has a strength in infrastructures of gas, that may be key in order to ensure the supply of the rest of Europe. A bigger interconnection capacity, these infrastructures are going to be fundamental for the diversification of the supply, but also they will contribute also to the decarbonization of the economy because they will be ready for the transportation of renewable hydrogen. The present crisis due to Ukraine's invasion by Russia has promoted a focus on global energy policies and especially those of the EU. This has meant that we have to revise the short, mid, and long-term objectives, now with the main focus on safety and energy autonomy. The questions that we are facing in the new scenarios are, for instance, what are the best technologies in order to fulfill all of the objectives? But also, what is the geopolitical implications that the decisions taken by the EU will have? We hope that today's session can be useful in order to build a constructive dialogue that may help us take these decisions. The energy crisis caused by Ukraine war has shown cruelly the risk that our economy depends on fossil fuels. The United States and EU have accelerated the transition because renewable and transition is the safest energy, fighting against climate change, reducing air pollution, and it takes us to a more competitive energy with more quality employments. Within the energy present context, and specifically in Europe, it is fundamental to have diversity of supply sources in order to guarantee the supply. Therefore, one of the alternatives in order to promote diversification of energy, continuing advancing on decarbonization and guaranteeing this supply, will be no doubt in the near future renewable gas. And in that sense, it is essential that we have an adequate safety of the regulation and that incentivates the European energy. The present international context is being very, very complex right now. The international landscape is being redrawn. The geopolitical powers are being reconfigured again, and this is generating a huge volatility that is having a very high impact on the safety of supply, but also on the prices of energy. Therefore, in order to help energy transition that we are going through is successful, it is fundamental to put together to play with the three axes of the triangle that are part of the triple dilemma: safety, sustainability, and affordable energy. It is fundamental to find the balance of the center of gravity of this triangle. It is a huge challenge that we need to face. The energy present situation pinpointed by the invasion of Ukraine has meant that we had forgotten the relevance of it. The safety of supply is very, very important. The future and the stability of the energy system of the EU will depend to a great extent on having a diversified model, a safe model, in order to maintain and protect our energy sovereignty. In order to reduce that dependency on the foreign countries, we need to promote renewable gas, biogas, biomethane, and hydrogen. That's going to be key for the success. And that is acknowledged by the European Commission within its plan in Europe. An energy vector which is critical in order to increase our autonomy with autonomous resources, all of that without giving up the process of transition towards a decarbonized model in 2050. Iberdrola, Naturgy, Repsol, Cedigas, thank you for your continuous support. And we're going to start the first session. I'd like to now introduce the speaker of the first plenary session, Ivor Estelbasky, who is the main advisor for energy diplomacy within the area global agenda and multilateral relations of the European External Action Service. He has not been able to be with us physically present, and he's going to be connecting us via Zoom. I can see that he is ready, and his I'm going to go into English in order to introduce him. Good morning, Tibor.
Good morning. Good morning from Brussels.
Very much for accepting our invitation and joining us today at such turbulent time in the UA history. Please let me introduce you properly to our audience. Mr. Stelbasky is an experienced diplomat with a demonstrated history of working in the EU decisions-making as government representative from Hungary. Skilled in European policies, public policy and regulatory issues, policy analysis, European law and decision-making. As I mentioned, currently, he's a principal advisor for energy diplomacy in the Department Global Agenda and Multilateral Relations of the European External Action Services. He has a Master in Science Economics and PhD in International Relations, both in the Budapest University of Economic Science. Mr. Stelbasky, once again, it's a pleasure having you here with us. When you're ready, please, the floor is yours to talk about the new role of energy in the European foreign policy.
Thank you very much and good morning once again from Brussels. Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to participate at your event and representing the views of the European External Action Service in relation to the energy and climate futures questions. I would like to start with two issues, which I think it's very, very much characterizing the situation now. The first is that also in the European Union, but I think Europe and also in worldwide, energy is again back on the top of the agenda. If you just remember, maybe 1 year ago, when we were preparing for the Glasgow COP26 meeting, then it was mainly about the climate goals and the outreach to others on the climate ambitions. Now, if we are heading to Sharm el-Sheikh, the COP27, everybody is speaking about energy and energy transition and how this situation, this crisis now in the energy policy will affect the climate goals and the COP27 success. In the EU, this is absolutely top on the agenda. A week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had here the EU ambassadors meeting. So all the head of delegations come to Brussels for seminars, for conference, for consultations. The event was with the participation of the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. There was also a session with the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, and all these meetings and other seminars, one constant and permanent topic was the energy. So energy is with us and high on the agenda. Another issue is, it is more related to the energy now. This is the weather and the weather forecast. It's maybe strange to change to this, but this is, you will see in my presentation, I hope so, that you will see that why this is important, that we are looking now also the weather forecast for the winter. So the first question is why energy is so much high on the agenda. And there is a very clear answer for this. Namely that the Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and its weaponization of energy policy has unequivocally exposed the risk of the EU energy dependency on Russia, and more broadly, or dependency on the imported fossil fuels. So the origin of the energy crisis is the manipulation of the gas market in Europe by Russia. The extreme gas wholesale prices are direct consequences of the withholding of Russian gas deliveries to the European market. It started before the war, actually. So already in last year, October, so a year ago, that was the first time that Russia delivered 30 or 50% less gas as it was in 2020. Parallel with this, the gas prices and linked to this, the energy prices as well, the electricity prices as well, started to increase. In October last year, so a year ago, it was already 100 euros per megawatt hour. Since 2 months before, it was well below 50 euros. So it very much shows that the war has a very strong impact on this, and on the demand and supply side of the market, it has a very huge implications on the market and also, of course, on the price. Since the war started in February 24, this year, the situation became even more serious. So this is a direct consequence. This is a direct cause of the situation what we are facing now, which is many cases is called as a perfect storm in the energy market. But if we want to be also honest with ourselves, there is another factor as well, which we have to keep in mind and look at it as well. And this is the underinvestment in the energy infrastructure still in Europe. And this question will be extremely important, extremely crucial from the point of view of the solidarity amongst the member states. So we have to keep in mind both issues, but I think it's very clear that the major cause, the major reason for this perfect storm is really the weaponizing the energy and the exposure of Hungary, of Europe, the EU to the dependency from Russia on fossil fuels. So, what was the first thing to do in this situation? The first was the security of supply issue. And preparation for a winter 22-23, so the forthcoming winter season. In this relation, the energy platform was established by the Commission in April 2020, and with the REPowerEU proposal from 18th of May, the Commission implemented the decision of the European Council already from February and March for the phasing out from the Russian fossil fuels. So the main aim of the REPowerEU proposal is the energy savings, to foster and to encourage energy savings, to build up, expand the homegrown renewable energy sources, and the third, to diversify the fossil fuel supplies. In link to this and in relation with this, in 19th of May this year, there was a political agreement among the member states and European Parliament on a legislation for a minimum gas storage obligations. According to these rules, member states need to reach a minimum of 80% of gas storage level by 1st of November, with aim, of course, to be prepared for the winter. Now the storage capacities, the storages are filled more than 90% of their capacities. So actually, the worries about the supply shock for the next winter has eased somewhat in the last 2-4 months, or let's say from the beginning of the autumn. As we see, the member states were able to replenish their natural gas inventories, reaching a worldwide more than 92% by mid-October. And also on the demand reduction, there are very significant results from the member states. So member states are using less gas in this month than it was in the past. It has also already an impact on the price as well, because we see that since mid-September there is a decrease on the gas. It's already around 100 euros as it was a year ago when the price increase just started, which is much less than it was in August, for example, this year, but still much higher, 4 times higher than the summer of 21. So it is still an issue which is important to follow and to look at it, and it should be also keep in mind that for the future contracts, the gas is still 140 euros, or for example for March next year or for April. So we see that this tackling the supply shock, the gas storage success has a very high price, and this is really the increase of the energy price in the during the summer and in the more overall since the start of when Russia weaponized the energy policy towards the Europe. So what we see now that the focus is more on the energy prices, less on the security of supply issues, and there is a consensus among the member states in Europe that most probably this winter is manageable. So the storages are full, the demand is reduced a bit, and if there is no extreme events or extreme weather conditions, then most probably this winter is manageable. So that's why I mentioned in the beginning of my intervention that the weather forecast is a key issue now in Europe to looking at the winter. Actually, now in Brussels is sunshine, 20 degrees or 21 is expected today. I had to put the blinds here not to be very bright from the sun. So far, the weather is in north side, but of course it can be very difficult for the winter. So what is the situation and the preparation for a winter of 23-24? So the next winter. I think that this is a key question, and this is a crucial question, because most probably the European inventories, the storages, could quickly be drained if temperature plunge in Europe, and people are of course crank up their heating, and there is a much more demand for heating. This is the same in the case in the US, where the northeastern states, which rely on LNG imports, they are particularly vulnerable to supply crunch in the cold winter. If the storage is emptied, let's say during the winter for March, then March or April, that it could have a several knock-on effect on the preparation for the next winter. And in March, starting from March, it might be more difficult to restock the inventories. We have to keep in mind that there is very likely that there will be no Russian supply for next year. It's important to note that this year, this success of storage filling was partly thanks also to that there was still Russian gas coming from pipelines to Europe, but it's very likely that that there will be no for the next winter. And it's also important that in this year, when we were searching for more LNG, the market situation was relatively favorable, because in China, mainly because of the zero COVID policy, the economic performance was a bit lower than usually. But it can be also with high possibility to expect that China will gear up next year, and then they have unlimited sources to go for the LNG, which means that from March, the situation which will be much more difficult to get the extra supply for Europe. So I think it's very important to know that the major challenge is still ahead of us, starting from next March. What can be the solution? What should we do in this situation? One element can be, of course, and should be definitely the improve and increase the diversification of the gas supply to Europe. And the energy platform is, and the joint purchase mechanism is a tool to help member states in this regard. As I mentioned, it already in April, the energy platform was established, but during the discussion of the informal European Council in the beginning of October in Prague, and also last week, the recent European Council, there was a very clear demand from the leaders, from the members of the European Council to help this joint purchase and to help the diversification and to give a framework to do this. And therefore, the Commission proposed on 18th of October a new regulation on the solidarity within the energy market in Europe, where a very important part is that there will be a framework, a legal framework for the joint purchase of gas. And the leaders endorsed this during their meeting in the European Council last week. So the energy platform, the joint purchase, can be a tool for helping next year the diversifications and for the preparation for the winter. It's very important. Maybe some words about this platform. It's very important to see that this is the aim of the platform is to coordinate the negotiations among the member states on the from the EU and also from the energy community for the with the upstream suppliers on the gas purchase. This is based on the companies. So the European Commission will not buy gas on the market. It will be up to the companies. And it's extremely important, of course, that the companies are involved to this exercise. Exactly today, this afternoon, will be the first meeting of the Industrial Advisory Board of the energy platform, which consists companies from the European Union to see how it can be really operationalized and implement this platform. So how it works, the Commission will organize aggregation using a service provider. So there will be a service provider who will give the IT tool and collect the demand from the companies or even from consumers, so high energy consumers collecting their demand. There will be an aggregation of this demand, and then it will be, offered to the market for supply offers and try to get the matching the demand and the supply. Of course, a lot of information is needed from the companies: volumes, delivery time, duration, entry point, place where the gas should come to European Union. The service provider will do this operational things with matching of the demand and the supply. So the aim is to have a long-standing contract with reliable partners, to build partnership, and to really ensure the diversification of the gas supply to Europe. Of course, it's not an easy exercise. This is a very pioneer exercise. So there was never in the past that Europe is purchasing jointly gas for the energy market. It's need a lot of cooperation between governments, EU institutions, and companies as well. It needs also solidarity among the member states, how the purchased gas can arrive to the places where it's really needed. It's important to note that if we look at the map, the most crucial, critical situation is in the middle of the continent, in Central Europe, in countries mainly which are landlocked, so they have no possibilities to achieve port and through to get the LNG gas, and this is the place where the Russian pipelines are ending. This is mainly a broader Central Europe, so including the Bavaria, East Germany as well, Czechia, Slovakia, Austria, North Italy, Hungary, Serbia, and others. So to get there the gas from the ports and from the LNGs, there needs still investment in infrastructure as well. And it's very important to keep in mind that, of course, the LNG might have also some constraints during the spring, as I mentioned, because of the start of the growth, more robust growth in China, where they will need, of course, the energy as well. So maybe two more points which I find it important to raise in this question. It seems to be now that somehow the Europe's climate ambitions taking the backseat now to energy. So it's less discussion on the climate, more on the energy security. There are facts also which demonstrate this. Because of the question of security supply, from January to August this year, the EU's coal import increased by 36%. But I think it's very important to note and very important to keep in mind during the whole exercise that the solution of this short-term immediate energy emergency situation needs very much to continue to pursue our long-term climate goals and green transition goals. So I think it's a very important point that we will be not able to solve our immediate emergency crisis if we are not achieve our long-term goals on the climate transition and climate neutrality. And this also valid for the opposite. We need to solve the emergency now to be able to pursue the climate goals. So it's very important that in the REPowerEU proposal from the Commission, there is an important part of measures to accelerate the renewable energy development within Europe. There is a new, more ambitious target of 45% renewable generation in the power sector by 2030. And a plan also includes additional 210 billion euros in renewable energy investment by 2027, with a significant share directed towards solar and wind generation. So all this major readjustment of the EU energy policy, of course, will have an impact on the third countries. I think it's crystal clear, as I mentioned, that if we diversify our energy supply, then we have to build new partnerships and long-term partnerships, mutually beneficial partnerships with third countries. Let it be in our neighborhood, like Norway, of course, Algeria, Egypt, Israel, more broader geographically, like Azerbaijan or the US, of course, which is an important partner for us. But we have to also look at the other areas in the world. But also, this situation provides a fertile ground for hostile narratives. For example, that the EU is using a double standards. We are preaching about climate action, but in the same time increasing fossil fuel imports. So it's very important to make sure and to make clear on this, that actually what we are doing now is really to reply and to find solutions for profound challenges from weaponization of the energy by Russia. So it means that we are not increasing our fossil fuel import, but replacing the Russian one. And of course, we will continue our climate goals, climate commitments. There is no change on this. Even the netto effect of this readjustment will be an acceleration for our energy transition. So it's need a very active communications. That's what the EU will do also in the COP27. But we have to make sure this also to our partners and to be very clear that tackling this situation is not at all anything against the climate goals. They are still valid. They are important. And contrary to some narratives, this situation will just accelerate our determinations towards the climate commitments and our measures and our actions towards our climate goals. So that's the situation more or less, how we see from Brussels, how we see from the external action service. As I mentioned, to solving the emergency situation and this crisis need very much cooperation among the member states and the institutions. And of course, I can reassure you that, of course, also in the EES, we are working very closely with the member states and also with third countries to help with all possible tools the diversification of the energy supply to Europe. So thank you very much once again the possibility to be here. I am very privileged and honored to be with you, and I wish a very good conference and work to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tibor. I think you have stated very clearly the very important challenges we have ahead. First, how to get this cooperation within the EU for this joint purchase, if it's possible is something I believe never has been done before and is a challenge. And after, how not to modify our goals in the medium term about our decarbonization and our switching to renewable energies. So thank you very much, Tibor. Y ahora ya pasamos a la mesa redonda.
And now we're going to start our panel discussion, our round table
Coordinada por Marta
that will be moderated by Marta Villares Curra.
catedrática de Derecho
She has a chair on financial and tax law at the University Theo San Pablo. She's a member of the Royal Academy of Jurisprudence. She's also a member of the Madrid Bar and an active member of different associations. She is vice president of the Supervisory Board of the International Fiscal Association. She's the author of more than 50 scientific publications. She's a specialist in energy and environmental, fiscal or tax law. She's been a member on the White Book on the tax reform. There will be a chance for questions to the panelists, either using the chat or here in this room. This session will also be in English. Without further ado, Marta, you have the floor.
Thanks for your presentation. Many thanks for the presentation, Chairman. And good morning, everyone. It's really an honor for me to address such a distinguished audience in my role as a moderator of this roundtable. The subject is of particular interest to all of us as citizens, at least for three reasons. First, the military conflict implies a shift in different European policies. Secondly, economic, social, and geopolitical impacts need to be considered, distinguishing emergency measures from long-term ones. And finally, because we are living in the so-called energy transition area, a great challenge. Thank you very much. And now, after two shocks, the COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine, many uncertainties are causing a great concern, also in terms of more or less climate change ambition. Developing a coordinated approach for energy security in Europe seems to be an urgent issue, but becomes extremely difficult, like a puzzle with missing pieces. We are worried about the future, and it is a great opportunity to know more from experts. To deal with this topic, answering the question of how to cope with all these impacts, today we have very distinguished guests, and they have all a large experience and knowledge on the energy sector. And perspectives and backgrounds will enrich the debate. It is a pleasure for me to introduce our speakers. Mrs. Ana Maria Sanchez Infante, who is sitting here on my right, is a financial economist bringing more than 20 years of professional experience in the European private and public sector. She is currently working at the European Commission as policy officer in the Energy Platform Task Force. Her unit is responsible for the energy policy outreach with member states and the overall coordination of member states' work for the delivery of the so important REPowerEU plan and the EU Energy Platform, in line with the European Green Deal objectives. In the private sector, she worked as a financial advisor in the UK and Spain, covering various sectors, among them renewables, energy efficiency, industrials, and also oil and gas. Welcome, Ana Maria. Mr. Marc-Antoine Elmaziga, who is sitting here on my left, is director of the French Institute for International Relations Center for Energy and Climate. He holds a PhD from Sciences Po Paris in International Relations, and prior to joining this important institute, he spent 6 years at the International Energy Agency, notably as Russia and Sub-Saharan Africa Program Manager, where he conducted oil and gas market analysis and was responsible for institutional relations with these countries and regions. Before that, he was in charge of a Ukraine observatory at the Robert Schuman Foundation. Welcome, Marc-Antoine. And we have joining us online also, Mr. Carlos Fernandez. Hello, Carlos, and welcome. He's acting head of gas, coal, and power markets division at the International Energy Agency. He has participated as a senior analyst specializing in coal in much of its publication, including this important publication that we already know, World Energy Outlook. He's mining engineer from the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid and has nearly 25 years of experience in the energy sector. He started in the area of engineer and consulting of power plants in the private sector, and then he entered into the course of state mining engineers by state exam. Was advisor also to the General Director of Energy and Mines Policy and Deputy Director General of Mines of the Ministry of Economy. In 2007, he became manager of the Institute for Restructuring of Coal Mining, and in 2010, he joined the International Energy Agency. And finally, we have also joining us online, Mr. Alexandre Affre. He's Deputy General Director responsible for the Industrial Affairs, Entrepreneurship and Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises Department at Business Europe. He is trained scientific and holds a master in ecology from the Université Pierre et Marie Curie. And Alexandre joined Business Europe in 2007. In this role in Business Europe, he is responsible for coordinating the organization's position on industrial strategy, energy, climate, environment, research and innovation, as well as entrepreneurship and small and medium-sized enterprises. He's also managing the corporate advisor and support group of Business Europe that regroups a selection of companies from all sectors of activity. Welcome, Alexander. And now we will have a first intervention from each speaker to express his or her vision or position on the subject. You will have about 8 minutes each to cover these issues, these important issues. Ana Maria, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Let's see if the microphone works. I think it works. Yes. Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very pleased to be here. I might repeat myself in a couple of issues as my previous colleague from the EES, but I will keep it short in a way that I want to make a little bit clear from a more technical point of view, because as Marta correctly introduced myself, I'm working as policy officer in the Director General for Energy. So we are behind all the different proposals coming from the Commission. So I'm really like me and a lot of colleagues involved in all these different proposals coming from the Commission. So I don't know, I asked for like the screening of a slide just to make clear, but I don't know if this is possible still, the screening of the slide, because I wanted to show a little bit in chronology what has happened in the last year. Thank you very much. I don't know, yeah, hopefully it's a bit distorted, but never mind. I think you get an idea about what has been happening more or less since a year. So we started in October last year already with a communication where, oops, yeah, it's not, okay. We started already last year in October with a communication where we raised, where we were already proposing measures. Thank you, yeah, now it's clear. In 13th of October 2021, where we already like made communication proposing different measures member states could implement, because we were already like observing since summer last year that prices in the wholesale market, mainly in gas, were starting to increase. So this was already our starting point, like giving member states the possibility to introduce short, medium term measures, also long-term measures. Of course, everything accelerated with invasion of Russia to Ukraine in February this year. I don't know, this is just, I'm just going to. For that. Yeah, okay. So basically, after the Russian invasion, the Commission, we came up already after the Versailles Declaration of the member states, we came already with like the communication of the so-called REPowerEU plan. So REPowerEU plan, as my previous colleague from the EAS was correctly describing, is a plan to like get rid of the dependence on Russian fossil fuels. This was an initial plan presentation, and we came across later in May with the REPowerEU communication. Sorry, I'm just like not going chronologically directly, but I'm really pointing to the main communications proposals we were like coming up. Basically, the REPowerEU plan, as it was already presented before, it has 3 different pillars. It's diversify away from Russian fossil fuels, meaning finding alternative suppliers. It's also about reducing the demand, because I mean, the first easy measure to do if you want to get rid of Russian dependence is to reduce your consumption. And then, of course, never forgetting our like long-term plans in terms of climate neutrality and renewables and energy efficiency targets to accelerate everything related to what we call clean transition, making reference to renewables and energy efficiency measures. And all this embedded in all the possible EU financial instruments in order to make this possible, the REPowerEU plan. Of course, we were including also increased renewable energy targets, increased energy efficiency targets. We were also wanting to, or we were proposing to increase investments in renewable hydrogen and renewable gases like biomethane, etc. So this is all embedded in the REPowerEU plan we presented in May this year. So we are currently really working on that. Also, one of the ideas proposed and now really implemented is the energy platform, which in a way is going to help or should help member states to aggregate demands, going out to the markets and secure the supply of energy for refilling the storage and coming like the best we can through the current winter, and also not forgetting the next winter, which is a little bit our main concern, because I think this winter we are fine. The gas storage are filled, even on top of what we were like setting in our regulation, because we were setting in our regulation, which came then later in the summer. We were establishing 80% filling storage this year and 90% by next year, but we were like above this. We are already at above this set maximum storage capacity. Going forward in the timeline, sorry that I go back to the timeline. After May REPowerEU plan, we presented in July. We presented the so-called safe gas for this winter, which means to set like a specific percentage of gas demand reduction for the member states. And in fact, the member states, they have presented this month in October, they had to present a plan how they want to implement this gas demand reduction of 15%. So this was proposed by the Commission, and it was really adopted very quickly by the Council. If I have time, or maybe later in the discussion, I will make a little bit of a difference what we mean by Council regulation and the other proposals, which needs to go also through the European Parliament. Council regulation, as you can imagine, has a much quicker implementation time because it needs only member states' approval. So going forward, this is what we did until the summertime, but of course, things didn't improve, so we had to continue preparing for this winter. So we came up in September of this year, mid-September, with a package, a proposal, again, a council regulation, with different energy emergency intervention proposals. So, for example, we proposed electricity demand reduction of 15%. We also proposed a revenue cap for inframarginal technologies. We also proposed a solidarity contribution coming from the fossil fuel companies. I think this is not very popular among some of the stakeholders in this event, but anyway, we came up with this proposal. Then, not stopping here, we continued with our work at the Commission, and now recently, 18th of October, and now I finished, we proposed a new package, a new energy emergency package measures. And this is currently discussed because there are some diverging opinions among member states, especially when it comes to putting a cap to the gas price. But I leave it here because I think you will have a lot of questions around what we have been proposing in the last year. I'm happy to answer to your questions when it comes to the Q&A session. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Ana Maria.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. It's impressive, the efforts made by the European Commission to react to this special situation. And now is the turn to Marc-Antoine Eyles-Masega, please.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you, and thanks for the invitation. And I cannot but agree. I mean, what the European Commission has been doing over the past few months is incredible. And what the member countries have been trying to do together is incredible as well. We have moved up several gears, I think, in terms of policy making, and that is a decisive moment. And I think we needed that because a business as usual energy transition wouldn't have worked. So thanks to the crisis, we are there. But the situation is terrible. And I'm afraid we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and we have to be all aware of that. Europe is no more the continent of stability. It is no more the continent of peace. And this was our defining factor for ourselves and for the rest of the world. And so that is a game changer. The second game changer is we have now the highest energy costs and prices among the OECD, but also probably if we compare this to the rest of the world. And that is really a terrible shock. And I'm afraid we're just seeing the beginning of the consequences of this, and our strategic competitors do not have these problems. And that is a big, big issue. And we'll come to that later, but not everything is driven by Putin. So there's a lot of things we can fix ourselves, and that will matter. I'm afraid there will be further military escalation in Ukraine, but also in Putin's war against Europe, against NATO. In Ukraine, it's a colonial war, but let's not also, hide ourselves. We have to face that this is also an aggression on us, and that there is probably also much more to come. So it's our very existence that is at stake, everything that we've been building for the past 70, 80 years in Europe since the Second World War. And so we need now a response to that. So we have seen very good elements of that, but I think we need much more. So let me tell you why. First thing is we need to save much more energy. We are not there yet, right? Next winter, 2023, will be absolutely terrible. And there is just one thing we can really do big time is saving energy. And what we've seen so far is demand destruction, but demand destruction is not a response to the crisis. this is just an additional catastrophe to the many catastrophes we have, right? So we need to save our industries. And so we need to reduce demand in the residential sector and the commercial sector to free up resources for the industries, for the real economy. The second point is, how are we going to do that? We need more price signals. And including in my country, in France, the price signal is almost nowhere, right? We are lucky in a way because this reduces inflation, but we need a real price signal. So we need to work on tariffs, and we'll talk about the electricity market reforms in a second, but there is a tariff element there that we need also to agree all at the EU level. We need, I think, very clearly, much more demand curtailment tenders, and this we are currently holding one big one in France for 5 gigawatts. I think there's much more that can be rolled out. On the positive side, we'll have much more nuclear available in France as we pass the year, and that is a really good news because it's been adding to the pain, of course, from everything that's happening to have such a low level of nuclear availability. But let's face it, we have water problems, especially here. Of course, you're all aware of that, but this will be there to stay. And we have problems because in a few countries, including Spain, but also Germany, gas demand and power generation has gone up. And I think that is a big problem, especially for next year. So let's fix that. Another problem that we have is the electricity market design. And on that, we really need to have and unfortunately, a rapid discussion, a rapid conversation, but that has to be very, very tough because we have to prepare right now for, allowing capital-intensive investments in nuclear. We need to have this discussion to allow for all the flexibility solutions we need in the power system. And I'm afraid there will be a need for thermal generation over the next 15 years, probably, and actually much more in several countries in the EU. And so we need the regulatory framework for that and to give the signal to investors who now look at Europe with a depreciated currency as a possible actually opportunity. But if we don't have the right signal for electricity, it won't work. On gas, a few words. Again, we will have next year probably 20 BCM of Russian pipeline gas left in Europe. So that is very little. So we have to offset that. And the LNG market is super, super tight. So there's not so much alternative, but again, to save more gas, right? To preserve some gas in the industry and save gas. There's no alternative on the short term. And then let's face it, on longer term, by 2030, we will need a lot of LNG, continuously a lot of LNG. So let's face it, we will not source, that 30, 40 BCM additional LNG via spot markets. That's impossible. We will just die from it economically. So we need a few more long-term contracts and we'll need to ramp up by a method. On renewables, Repower EU is a great momentum, but doing 700 gigawatts additional solar and wind capacity in 8 years is impossible. Let's face it. We are just on track to realize this by 2045. And a lot of the problems, it's inflation, it's value chain problems, it's skills, it's equipment, it's the fact that we are competing with the rest of the world. A lot of investment will go from our companies, Iberdrola, the Total Energies, the Shells, etc. They will go abroad. Why? Because the conditions are better. And we have to make sure we are the most attractive area in the world for renewables investment. And if we don't manage that, we'll fail. But this is something we can achieve ourselves. This is not Putin. This is something we have to work on. And I think here there's a lot of room to improve that further. So the energy transition costs are rising. That's very clear. But the good news is, with the inflation reduction measures that have been implemented in every EU country, we are now stepped up the financial commitments from our governments. Before the crisis, frankly, the discussion was, are we going to put 1 billion or 2 billion in next year's budget for the energy transition? I mean, these was peanuts, right? So now we have moved to the serious level of spending, which is good. Now we have to gear it toward what is really cost efficient, and I think that is the biggest challenge. And of course, we have to be aware that, much more money will have to be made available, right? So next generation EU funding is not totally spent. We have to improve that. And then we have to start a conversation on the next package, right? So in a nutshell, and I'm going to finish, the industries, we are going to lose some of our energy intensive industries. That's for sure, right? So we have to accelerate on rolling out and deploying the clean energy industries, that will replace that. And we have to do the job conversion and we have to work on the skills. So that means that including here in Spain, you need, in tenders for solar, for wind, you need local content, you need carbon footprints, you need eco design regulation. So let's improve that. Same for France, same for everywhere, so that, we build these factories here. And let's face it, this is a real competition, and the US is a tough competitor with us now. So is China, so will be Japan. And if we do not take this seriously enough, we will lose on all fronts. And in terms of perspectives, and I'll finish here, I have 5 seconds left, to tell you that we see Spain with huge opportunities out of this crisis, because you have already been very successful in rolling out corporate PPAs. You've been very successful in rolling out solar and wind. You have now a very good and sound hydrogen strategy, I think, with very serious proposals. So very clearly, with the lower electricity prices that you now have compared to us, well, you're in a good position. So you just continue like that, but please, one demand, let's put our ideologies aside. Let's stop opposing nuclear, opposing, blue hydrogen with green hydrogen, with whatever color hydrogen. Let's just be pragmatic. Let's try to work together and, set aside our difference, because otherwise Putin wins, the climate loses, and our economies and societies also lose. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marc-Antoine, for these optimistic views and very key messages on the importance of prices, having good prices, good signals, good regulation. You have mentioned many, many important issues. And now is the turn to Carlos Fernandez. I hope we will have another perspective and different views, and specifically on investment in the energy sector. Please, Carlos, the floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias por la invitación.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I agreed with the organizers that I would speak in English, so I'm going to change languages.
Thank you for the invitation, for the introduction. A pleasure to be there, especially with Marc-Antoine. We spent some time doing the policy reviews of Ukraine and Russia, the two of us, so great memories from those more peaceful times than those. As you mentioned, as soon as 3rd March, the IEA published the 10 action point plan to reduce EU reliance on Russian gas. But in order to try to avoid the repetition with other speakers and so on, I will look at the things from another angle, that is the angle of investment. I think we will agree that we are in the worst, the first truly global energy crisis, because 70s crisis was more about oil, and the worst energy crisis that we have had. And investment can sort kind of, first to relieve pressure on consumers, and also to help or to accelerate the pace of well into a net zero pathway, and also to spur economic recovery. And indeed, to accelerate also this the end of the reliance on Russian gas that has been also driven by other circumstances. So a challenge that governments, companies, and investors in general need to face is that the short-term needs are not sometimes aligned with the longer term. So this is something that is, let's say, that a challenge or a fact that they must face. So in order to give a number that, as you know, we like to look at the numbers. So energy investment for 2022, we assess that we expect something like $2.4 trillion. So if we compare with the GDP in dollars 2021, this is like, that is somehow below 100 trillion. So this is kind of over 2%. So this, I would say, it's a good news in the sense that it's well over pre-COVID levels, but this is with with two different trends. So we see that the investment in oil, gas, and coal are below pre-COVID, below 2019 level, let's say. And on the other hand, investment in the power sector, let's say renewable grids, is increasing, which is good news given the electrification that and the reliance on electricity in the decarbonization. We observe rising cost is obvious, coming from supply chain pressure, shortage of workforce in many works or in some works, and also importantly high energy prices that go to many materials. I mean the two typical materials are steel and cement. These renewables, or we want to say solar panels and wind turbines, are not free from this. So after many years of declining costs, given these elements that I mentioned, we have now a cost rise in solar panels or wind turbines that this can put a break in the investment despite the strong price signals that the electricity market, the wholesale markets are giving. So this can, I mean, at least the government should be aware of these circumstances, because this is something that didn't happen in the past. If we split rather than by sector, by country, we see that in the clean energy sector, the largest investment is China. This is now, I moved to 2021 data to talk about the real data. So we calculate around $380 billion invested by China in clean energy, compared with 260 in the EU and $125 billion in the US. I mean, we can see this from different angles. Indeed, China is the largest investor in clean energy, okay? But for example, if we see this in terms of compare with population or energy consumption or electricity consumption, our investment in the European Union is higher. Regarding the power generation that, as I said, concentrates most of the investment, basically there are three areas: renewable, grid, and storage, that concentrate the investment. Globally, half of investment are on PV, that is the real champion in this time. Half is utility scale and half is distribution. So we also see some momentum in offshore wind that, compare with basically the dominance, the big dominance of onshore wind in the past. There is also good momentum and efficiency, but we have a higher borrowing cost, so this can be a break in investment. We have many households suffering from the energy prices and inflation that gives less margin for investment, and there is an unprecedented uncertainty that is never good for investment. So now to finish, I would like also to mention as a global trend that most of the clean energy investment are concentrated in mature economies and China, with some exceptions, some bright spots, here and there. You can say PV in India. There has been also good developments in Brazil, but we see that if we want to go to a net zero world, as my boss, executive director of the IEA, Fatih Birol, usually often reminds, CO2 emission don't have a passport. So we need to really think of it, because if we don't have on board also emerging and developing economies, we are not going to go to the to our goals. I mean, in this sense, for example, the increasing rates in the capital, this will be a big burden there, because indeed the cost of capital that many of those economies face are higher than what we face. So I mean, as you all perfectly know, a mere 2% increase in the borrowing cost rates can increase the level cost of these high capex technologies like wind and solar by 20%. So this is something to consider. So I think we'll have time to discuss some more things during the question and answer. So I don't want to. I want to leave more time for the others. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this review of the tendencies, of the technologies, of the need for more investment, and this different background, China from Europe. It's clear that we need more resources. And now is the turn to Alexander Affer, and we really want to know more about the business sector perspective. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marta, and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Never easy to be at the end because a lot of things have been said, and I will do my best to complement and firstly to give a broad European business perspective on the situation, the energy crisis situation, how we assess and where we see possible solutions to the situation. But again, probably also echoing some of the comments which have been made by the previous speakers and trying to complement. So I think my first point is on the situation, the assessment of the situation, the diagnosis. Here I will, to a good extent, large extent, converge with several points made before. We are in the middle of a twofold energy crisis. On one side, the supply aspect, with gas very much linked to the situation and the war in Ukraine. Not only, as it has been mentioned, there are other factors playing a role in the supply issues we have, or we had, and we still have on the energy supply, but to a large extent with the situation and the war in Ukraine. And for us here, something which is really key as business is to avoid in the coming weeks and months, probably months now, but to avoid any forced mandatory curtailment of industry. I think it has been mentioned before, we see in a number of member states schemes put in place, tenders to have voluntary reduction, curtailment of industrial activities with certain conditions, and this is okay. What we really want to avoid is forced curtailment of industry, because even if the situation is already difficult to manage for many industries, if they are forced on a short term to have curtailment, the impact will be really of a wider scale and really negative. So really something we want to avoid. So this is the supply, and of course there is the element of the prices, and this is extremely with high preoccupation. I think it's now very well visible the impact the situation has on industry, with some being more exposed to others, of course, but overall the situation is very difficult. Large, medium, small industries, this is widely spread. There are sectors like in the fertilizer industry where 70% of production has been reduced or even closed. So we are talking about huge figures here. And and there is also for many of these industries, energy-intensive industries, the element of competition in the global situation, where we see the price gap increasing between Europe and some of the major competitors. And this is, of course, at a moment where many industries are looking for the budget for next year, investment for next year. Yes, there is a real challenge for many of them, and it's the possibility of maintaining those investments in Europe, where the conditions in terms of energy prices are really, really difficult. So I think this is in short the assessment of the situation. Now moving to the discussion and the ongoing debates about what has been done, what needs to be done. I think it has been mentioned by if I may, Anna Maria before, the number of, or maybe I should say before, of course, many things have been done at European level, but many things, of course, have been done at national level as well in terms of supply, increasing the supply, and some prolongation of certain energies, nuclear, coal has been mentioned as well. I mean, of course, in terms of supply, things have been developing quite fast at national level, and also in terms of measures to support citizens and industries. A number of initiatives have been taken at national level. But yes, as it was mentioned before, many things have been happening in the last months at European level in terms of increasing the efforts to supply energy, LNG, but not only via from third countries. We have seen as well good initiative by the Commission about the decrease of demand for electricity and gas, and that's maybe an element of comments by me, of course, and this is really difficult to manage, but here there is the need to find the right balance between the need to act fast, and this we fully acknowledge. I mean, I'm saying myself, the energy prices situation is really difficult, so we need actions, we need to act fast, but to be balanced with also the need to have sufficient consultation of those who will be asked to implement the regulation and the policies, and I'm talking here, of course, for business and industries. So, and here it's a difficult balance to be found, and it was mentioned before. Proposals like on the inframarginal revenue cap, on the solidarity contribution. Even if we can understand the rationale and the objective, yes, especially because I think certain lack of consultation by some sectors, or the concerned sectors, not sure the design has been the best which could have been achieved, and there are big questions about being very vigilant and avoid a situation where we put less capacity for the sectors to invest in the transition and to supply the energy European market. So I think this is really a point, I think, of extreme vigilance to find the right balance between speed, but also the need to be sufficiently in contact with those who will be implementing. I think. Now, from our perspective, Business Europe perspective, especially on the prices situation, the high energy prices that are in Europe and where industry is really struggling, we think more should be done, and we have been clear for some weeks now. One of the concrete measures which needs to be not just considered, but also implemented at European level, we think is the decoupling of electricity prices from gas prices. As a temporary measure, as an emergency measure, and you need also to have the necessary safeguards to avoid negative impact, but and it will not, of course, solve all the problems, but it will certainly on a short term help mitigate the overall energy bill for citizens and industry, of course, as well. So I think this is a concrete measure which really need to be tabled very soon now. Nobody has mentioned as well the state aid, the European state aid framework, which we think as well is extremely important to be well balanced here as well in terms of providing space for member states to provide the necessary support for affected industries, and at the same time maintaining a level playing field in the single markets. But here, this is also a very important element of the debate. And maybe to finish, not to be too long in my first introduction, but of course, like several said, we are dealing with the short term, and actions have been taken, more needs to be taken, but there is no doubt about the long-term trajectory and the long-term decarbonization goal that we need to maintain. It's less visible now, of course, but there are still very intensive discussions about the Fit for 55 package, and this will be key for the long term, and we are very supportive of finalizing this very soon. And of course, elements about investment, which was mentioned just before, will be key to make us, will be key to address and bring us on track for the long-term decarbonization objectives. And I stop here for my first comments.
Many thanks, Alexander. I think there are so many ideas on the table that maybe we can discuss just in a few moments and have a more interactive part of this roundtable, because you mentioned, Alexander, the risk of some sectors, some enterprises, like the chemical sector or fertilization. But also Carlos mentioned the vulnerability of households, how to combine that. And we all have mentioned the solidarity contribution. I think your presentation were very much thought-provoking, and now it's time for a more interactive dialogues with our speakers. But let me just announce like a practical question. There will be some time at the end for questions from the audience to the speakers. And please indicate to whom the question is addressed. Now we start this other part of the session, the part of dialogue, and go into some key ideas. And I would like to have a question for Ana Maria. What do you think? Which dominant European energy policy pathways will emerge from the current crisis?
Yes, well, basically a very important message from the Commission in this sense is that we have not changed our initial plan of you may recall, European Green Deal, when we started with a new Commission headed by President Ursula von der Leyen. So this Green Deal ambition is still there. We still are heading for the 2050 climate neutrality. And in this long pathway, we're still going for all the proposals we have been presenting within the Fit for 55 package, which was also mentioned by the previous speaker. So all this is still on our table. It's still being negotiated. Currently, the Fit for 55 package in the different packages is still under negotiation by what we call co-legislators between Council and European Parliament. The Commission, we are there for technical explanations and advisory, but the co-legislators are currently negotiating. So this is all still going on. This has not stopped. So just as a reassurance that we're still with our initial plan, European Green Deal, climate neutrality, and the presented Fit for 55 package proposals. So this is a little bit like my main message to the audience, that this has not changed, in fact. And with this new context, and I finalize here, We will be accelerating all of these different proposals and even increasing some of the proposed targets. So in that sense, we have to head for an acceleration in order to get rid of this dependency on Russian fossil fuels. And I stop here because I want to leave the other speakers also to intervene. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana Maria. I then understand that climate change is still in the middle of this puzzle. That's right?
It is, and I have also to reassure you that DG Energy, where I work, we are always in close cooperation with our colleagues in DG Climate, meaning also between Vice President Timmermans and our Commissioner Kadri Simpson. It's a constant exchange, and we are like cooperating the different services on our different proposals. So this is, I mean, this has not stopped. And I would say even more taking place now with this new context. So we have not forgotten on the other hand, we are even more like enforcing and willing to accelerate all what we have been proposing in the energy part.
It's good to know that. Many thanks. I have one specific question to Mark. Because Mark, you mentioned the importance of taking into account the position of the states. Is the EU going to end up more fragmented, and what is needed to avoid this fragmentation, notably of energy markets? Because you mentioned specifically the importance of regulation and the importance of prices.
Yes, many thanks. I think that's the biggest risk, clearly. And there is elements of fragmentation already visible and elements of erosion. I mean, in times of crisis, it's normal, but you know, this is where we should really work against that current and try to get some order and more coherence, etc. Why do we see this fragmentation? It's political. I come from France. With France and Spain, it's been very difficult on energy, notably in past months. But it's also incredibly difficult between France and Germany these days, not only on energy, but also in defense policies. Actually, we've probably had one of the worst relationships we've had over many, many years between France and Germany, but also between Germany and Poland, between Brussels and Poland, between Brussels and Budapest, you name it, you know, you can go along like that. So, so that is very bad. And then we have the economic and financial fragmentation, because most of the member countries can only spend something like around 2 or 3% of GDP to alleviate the pain of inflation. But we have Germany that is ready to spend over 8%. And of course, the challenge and the issues are much more bigger in Germany than elsewhere for obvious reasons, but still. I mean, here you have this fiscal devaluation that is happening, and that is a big challenge for others. And in Central Europe and other parts of Europe, you cannot spend so much. Although you would need to spend so much, but you simply cannot with your own resources and in going to to the sovereign borrowing markets. It doesn't work like that. We have also another problem, which is that we've introduced massively fossil fuel subsidies, but in a little bit probably unconcerted and too large way. For example, in my country, in France, there's a 30-cent gasoline tax reduction per liter for everyone. And yeah, I mean, this is what we've been telling to the rest of the world for the last 10 years since the G20 Pittsburgh meeting in 2010. Let's phase out fossil fuel subsidies. And then we were kind enough to say, let's phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidy. But we are just reintroducing super inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. And, it's just not France, it's everywhere. I'm sure here in Spain, there is issues as well in that direction for the fishery sector, or agricultural sector, etc. So, we have to be serious about targeting that. And so another issue of fragmentation, which we have to really have center stage as we design these policy responses, is energy poverty. So I think it's really now, eating into the middle class. But also the differences within Europe are huge, right? So you know, in Bulgaria, colleagues tell me that, you know, the energy cost of the average household is now way above 30% of the income. 30% of the income, way above. Whereas more in France, it's still somewhere between 6 and 7%, right? And so, of course, with Spain, it might be much bigger, etc. But still, I mean, we have to be aware of that. And our union will not resist to these huge discrepancies, right? And on energy, clearly, the, you know, one of the ways to avoid this further fragmentation beyond what I just mentioned is, you know, to clarify that, well, all these patches we do in the electricity systems and, you know, the availability to subsidize all out retail consumers, etc. And of course, many of these are necessary, but let's work on, you know, on harmonizing that, on you know, setting stages to progressively come out of that and to have the deeper, more structural reforms of the electricity market. And I have an idea for colleagues from the European Commission. Maybe a way to avoid this fragmentation on the renewables, which is one of the key, you know, that's the obvious, one of the obvious responses we have, is perhaps to try to raise transparency among the different member countries on how come that, you know, in France we have these and these delays on permitting, or we have these and these requirements, and how come you don't have this, but you have something else in Spain or in Greece, etc. And why is it, and what is being done to really improve that, and to really track this, and to have some very clear benchmarks on, you know, what are, you know, operators on the ground telling us on how effective actually the measures are to accelerate. And so we could benchmark that around among our, you know, among ourselves, and the industries and the investors and everyone could, you know, say, oh, Spain is doing great, and I don't know, France is doing bad, or vice versa. But the point is, and then to have some very clear ways to measure that. And I think that would be very powerful to raise also the pressure, you know, on governments and on public administration, etc., to, you know, to do the job actually, and to really deliver on that.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with you. Transparency is so important. Transparency and cooperation, but I don't see if transparency and cooperation are very much aligned with competition. Competition among states, competition among industries, technologies. Let's turn to Alexander, because I think the things you are mentioned are very much related to the state aid framework. And I have a question for you, Alexander. Is the current state aid framework, the temporary crisis framework, I mean, fit for purpose?
So first, I think this is one element of the toolbox to deal with the situation we have now, as I was mentioning. So we do think that this is one of the important elements of the measures to be implemented. The European Commission has already has developed a framework for to deal with the situation, the crisis situation. Of course, looking as well at the energy situation. And is now in the process of updating and I think it should be now the final text of the revised European State Aid Framework should be soon published. Here, what is really important for us is first to have an extension, because the current framework is to be effective until the end of 2022, and I think all know that the situation will remain for 2023, so it has to be prolonged to next year. Also, we think we need to have some improvement on the scope of the framework, to have more industries exposed to the high energy prices being eligible to possible compensation at national level, again, while maintaining the level playing field. I think this is really key, and the good state aid framework will allow this. So an extension of the scope of industries being eligible to state aid intervention. And lastly, also to think about some of the eligibility criteria, because when we look at the current framework, there are questions around some of them. For instance, companies have to have a negative or have to have negative earnings to be eligible for state aid compensation. So basically, they are forced to continue producing with massive losses, with the hope that at a later stage, they will be able to have some state aid support. But we think this should be the other way around. So that's one example of an eligibility criteria where we think some improvement would be much welcome. Just to again illustrate where we see some room for improvement.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have one question for you, Carlos. Do you think that clean energy technologies are to be blamed for the current crisis?
Yeah, this is a very good question that